Hello and thank you for coming to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about the concept of factoring. Now the first type of factoring I want to talk about is common factoring, and it's the first method you should always try to do when faced with a factoring problem to see if it works, and it consists of finding a greatest common factor or GCF. So the first example we're going to do is 10x to the power of 5 plus 25x to the power of 2 minus 15x. Now we're going to look at these three terms and we're going to see what they have in common with each other. So we can see that the coefficients 10, 25, and 15 are all divisible by 5. So we're going to write that down. Then we're going to look at the variable and the exponent. We're going to make sure that they have at least a variable, so that as we can see they all have the variable of x. And the lowest exponent there is the 1 exponent on the 15x. So as we can see, the 5x is the only thing that all three of the terms have in common. Then we're going to add a bracket, and we're going to see what we need to do to get to from 5x to any term in the equation. So for example, let's look at 5x. What do we need to get from 5x to 10x to the power of 5 in terms of multiplication? So first the coefficients, 5 times what gives us 10? That's 2. And using exponent laws, we know that to get from x to the power of 1, and then we get that to x to the power of 5, we need to multiply x by x to the power of 4. Then we look at the next term. Now 25x to the power of 2 is positive because of this positive out front. So we're going to add a positive inside of the bracket. Then we're going to see the coefficients. So to get from 5x to 25, we need to multiply 5 by 5. And then again, using exponent laws, to get from x to x squared, we need to multiply x by x. Now the 15x is negative, so we need to add a negative, because when a positive term is multiplied by a negative term, the answer is negative. And then to get from 5 to 15, we need to multiply it by 3. And we're not going to put an x inside of the bracket. We're going to close off of the bracket right here because there's already an x out front. So 5x times negative 3 is going to already give us negative 5x. Now the next problem is 3m squared plus 6mn minus 9. Now this problem we cannot solve using common factoring because they do not have the same variables in common with each other. So for example, 3m squared doesn't have the variable n, and negative 9 doesn't have any variables at all. So we cannot solve it using this method. The next method we're going to explore is factor by grouping, and this does not involve using finding a greatest common factor, but it does involve needing a polynomial with an even number. So that could include a polynomial with 2 terms, 4 terms. It just has to be an even number of terms. So we have here 5xy minus 10x minus 3y plus 6. Now we're going to separate this equation into groups. And each group is going to have 2 terms, and the coefficients need to be divisible with each other. Only the coefficients, the variables and the exponents do not matter in this circumstance. So we're going to look at 5xy minus 10x. Now 5 and 10 are divisible by 5, and they both have an x, so we're going to pull that out as well. Now to get from 5x to 5xy, we're going to multiply it by y. And the negative 10x is negative, so we're going to add a negative in the bracket. And then to get from 5 to 10, we're going to multiply it by 2. And again, we don't need to add an x because there's already an x out front. Then we're going to look at the negative 3y plus 6, because obviously 3 and 6 are divisible by the same number. So we're going to add a negative 3 out front and the bracket. Now to get from negative 3 to negative 3y, we have to multiply it by y. Now the negative 6 is positive, so when you multiply, and we have a negative right here. So we need to multiply a negative by a negative to get a positive. And it will become y minus 2. Now we know we're right because the 2 brackets are the same. So we're going to pull those out for our final answer. And then we're going to see anything that's on the outside. And that is going to be its own bracket, 5x minus 3. And this is our final answer, and we know that it's our final answer because if we were to FOIL it, we would get the same exact equation as our initial problem. So let's do that really quickly. So y times 5x would be 5xy. Y times negative 3 would be negative 3y. Negative 2 times 5x would be negative 10x. And negative 2 times negative 3 would be positive 6. And that is our initial problem. The next type of problem we're going to be doing is simple trinomial factoring, in which the problem or the question has to follow the format of x squared plus b plus c. And we're going to replace the term b with two numbers that multiply to c and add to b. So, right now we're going to assign the variables. So y squared is equal to the x squared over here. And it can be any letter. It can be x squared, it can be y squared. It doesn't matter as long as it's consistent throughout. Plus the 2y is the b, and the negative 63 is the c. So now we have to find two numbers that multiply to negative 63 but add to 2. And those two numbers are positive 9 and negative 7. Because negative 7 times 9 equals negative 63, but 9 minus 7 equals positive 2. So now we're going to rewrite the whole equation, keeping the first and the last term the same, but we're going to replace the 2y with plus 9y and negative 7y. So it's going to look like this. Now, since this is a simple trinomial factoring, once we know that the numbers are positive 9 and negative 7, we can go straight away and go y plus 9, and then another bracket y minus 7. Because again, when we FOIL, we're going to get the same equation as our original problem. Now, with complex trinomials, we're going to do an extra step. And we're going to multiply the a and the c values, but we're still going to find two numbers that multiply to c and add to b. Now, what is important to note about this example, 9x squared minus 33x plus 30, is that they're all divisible by 3 initially. So we're going to take out that 3, and this is something you should check for whenever you're doing factoring problems. And then again, we're going to just see what's left over and how can we go from 3 to whichever term is in the problem. So 3 times 3x squared will give us 9x squared. 3, to go from 3 to negative 33x, it's negative 11x. And to go from 3 to 30, you have to multiply 3 by 10. So now this 3 is going to stay consistent throughout the whole equation. It's just going to stay out front so that we know whatever solution we come up with, it has to be multiplied by 3 to get to the original problem. Because again, every term is divisible by 3. So now, as we can see, we can't simplify it anymore, but there's a term outside of the a value, or of the x squared value. And before, in simple trinomials, there was no term. It was just y squared. The coefficient was 1. But now that the coefficient in front of the x squared or in front of the y squared, whichever variable that's squared, is a number other than 1, we have to multiply a by c, and that's what makes it complex trinomial. So the c value now becomes 30, because 10 times 3. So now we have to find a number that when multiplied, it's 30, and when added, it's negative 11. And that number is negative 5 and negative 6. Because negative 5 times negative 6 equals 30, and negative 5 minus 6 is negative 11. So again, we're going to keep this 3 out here at all times. And we are going to keep the problem the same. Now, because this is complex trinomial, we can't write x squared minus 5 in brackets, and then in another bracket x minus 6, we have to go through what we were doing before, and we have to then take what we have inside of the brackets, what we have out of the brackets, and make them to two separate brackets. So we're going to look at the 3x squared minus 5x, and what do they have in common? They have x in common. So then in brackets, it's going to be 3x minus 5. And then the negative 6x plus 10, they are divisible by 2. So minus 2, 3x minus 5, because the 10 is positive, so two negatives make a positive. Now we see what's inside of the brackets, and it's 3x minus 5 and x minus 2. So again, we're taking what's inside of the brackets, and that's a set of brackets. And then what's left over is its own set of brackets right here. And this is the answer to our problem. Next thing we're going to be talking about is something called difference of squares. And it's a type of factoring where when you have two numbers square rooted with a minus sign in between. So when there's a number or a variable squared minus a number that can be square rooted. So for example, x squared minus x. We're going to square root both numbers. So the square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 16 is 4. And so the format of the answers to difference of square is that you square root both terms, and you put one of them, the first square root, at the beginning, then one bracket has a plus sign, one bracket has a negative sign, and then you put the second square root there. So the first square root plus the second square root in one bracket, and the first square root minus the second square root in another bracket. So for example, if you had y squared minus 100, the format looks like this, and then the square root of y squared is y, the square root of 100 is 10, and then you just fill those in. Now, if we had the question 14 plus x squared, this question is not a difference of square question because the square root of 14 is not a whole number. Now, if we had a problem like x minus 100, that also is not a difference of square question because when you square root x, well, you can't simplify it any further. Again, it's not a whole number. And if you have, for example, x plus 100, x squared plus 100, this isn't a difference of square because there has to be a minus in between the two terms in the problem. Thank you for coming to my video. I hope this helped you with your homework or any kind of problem that you are trying to complete. If you want to get better at math problems like this one, please subscribe and like for more content. Thank you.